Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Welcome, Brother Johnathan. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I'm so glad to have you on. We have actually known each other for 4 years?
I'm not sure.
It's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the grand scheme of life, maybe not that long, but like in terms of knowing the brothers and how long the brothers have been here, I feel like we've known each other for a while.
I guess since 2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So 5 years.
Well, yeah.
For anyone that might not know you, how long have you been in Boise? And
I arrived in 2019, and I've been away for a couple of months and years at different points, but a total, I guess, of 5 years.
And I actually addressed you incorrect. You're Father Johnathan.
Now I'm Father Johnathan.
Not Brother Johnathan. I met you when you were a brother, but now you were actually a priest, and that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to be talking about your vocation story and kind of how you ended up here in the first place. But I guess that's a great place to start. So let's go ahead and start with how you were introduced to maybe Father Dom or the brothers, and your kind of story to vocation, to how you got to the point of wanting to be a brother, or how you felt called to that vocation.
I met Father Dominique in New Zealand at a school called the Catholic Discipleship College, which is a school where Father Dominique was the chaplain for a number of years, and I met him in 2015 I didn't know him before I attended the school. And I joined in the beginning of 2015 and stayed the whole year. And he would come every couple of months to give classes on philosophy and theology. And he was really great. So he introduced me to the brothers. The year after I finished it's a year-long course at the school. And the year after I finished that, I asked Father Dominique where I could find a place that would offer a similar formation to the place that he was at, because I couldn't stay longer than a year, and he suggested that I go to the brothers in Mexico originally, and I met them there, the community in Mexico, and it was great. So then I stayed.
It's funny. I actually probably should have had you on first, but I think when I first started this, I think you were traveling at the time. And so I didn't have you on, but it really is funny because all the other brothers are like, well, I met Brother Johnathan, and then he went to Mexico, and so I had to come to Mexico just to, follow him. So it really is kind of funny because in the previous episodes we've had with some of the brothers, they've also talked about that. But so let's go back to the discipleship college for a second. So what was your journey like to get to that point? Yeah.
So I spent all of my high school years homeschooling and were really involved in the soccer team in my town, and I was really close, I guess, to a lot of the guys on my soccer team, and they were all I guess planning on going different places once we got to the end of high school. And so I thought a little bit about what I should do around the end of high school, and I realized that I didn't have a lot of idea of what I wanted to pursue, because I'd enjoyed soccer and that was my main thing, I guess. And so after that, I decided that maybe I would try and do something deepen my faith and really make my faith my own. I'd grown up in a really strong, really beautiful family, I guess, and with a lot of support and a lot of protection from my parents, and I guess I really wanted to I guess, make the most of what I'd received and really make it my own. And so I looked at different options, but I guess in New Zealand, the Catholic Discipleship College was well known for being a really beautiful place and a good solid formation, and so that's how it happened, I guess.
Well, a couple of questions with that. First, I want to ask you about when you said that it sounds like now you recognize that was a beautiful gift that your parents had given you. At the time, did you also recognize it, or was it something you had to grow to appreciate later?
I think I recognize it much more than I did now. I don't think I realized how unique it was at the time. But I also think I appreciated it enough, I guess, at the time not to have any tension, I guess, or not to, like, I don't think I ever didn't appreciate it, if I can say that, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like, so I know, not everyone, but you also sometimes hear, like, homeschoolers might rebel or something, trying to, like, get enough experience, but it sounds like you were involved in sports and stuff, so it probably wasn't as much of a problem.
Yeah, I had a good community, a good parish community, I guess, and then also, like, I spent a lot of time playing soccer, and so I got to know a lot of people through that, and I never felt like I was missing out on anything, really. Yeah.
So in New Zealand, is it any different than in the United States, where, so for example, high schoolers often will practice their sport a lot and then get scholarships, right, to go to college, and then play on the team with a scholarship. Is that something that they do in New Zealand? Is that something that you ever, like, had thought about doing, or was that your goal, I guess? What did that look like?
I don't know if I ever really considered it. I don't think I had a really stable long-term plan until ever. And I think that in the States, the scholarship, especially to do with sports, is a lot stronger and a lot and
more common, maybe? Is it like...
Yeah, I think so. And also, I don't think you have to earn your place in a team before it starts getting serious. Yeah, I gotcha. So and I'm sure there are exceptions, but yeah, I wasn't ever one of those exceptions, so it never crossed my mind, and it never
So with the other thing you said is you had a strong Catholic community. From what I've heard from some of the other brothers, is that depending on where you are in New Zealand, it can be a little maybe more dry, or just maybe more secular, where the Catholic community isn't as strong. So was that the case for your community, or how did that, like, differ? Because they were saying it's very almost geographic, where there might be a pop-up community here that's really, really close-knit, and then it could be like nothing for a while, so they're very sparse, maybe is a good word.
I guess it's true. I think that especially the young Catholics tend to gravitate to where there is a stronger community of young Catholics, and I think there's not many places that have a very strong or a very large young Catholic community. I think I was blessed to be quite involved in the parish as a whole, and so I guess the community was all of the different age groups of that parish, and who were really supportive and really great role models, but also really helpful to me, and just giving me a lot of encouragement and growing up, and I think I was mostly referring to the parish as, like, just that community of...
Did you guys have religious around when you were at that parish, or was it just priests, or what did, like, the landscape look like?
Yeah.
What did it look like to be in that parish?
Yeah, so we always had very good priests, and there were some religious sisters who are no longer present in the parish. We had some Mara sisters and some Josephite sisters who were present when I was growing up, and who were all wonderful examples. I was very close to all of the priests growing up in my parish, and they were all amazing. I feel very blessed to have had such great priests growing up. Yeah.
Okay, so I just had Father Hippolytus on, and he talked about one of his favorite memories as a child is his parents would invite the priests over, and then when they were sending the priests away, his parents would give him like chocolates or wine or something, some kind of gift to send with the priest, and he would give him a blessing. So I was just thinking how involved he was with the priests in his community. So when you're talking about you had really good priests, in what ways were they like influential on you, or why would you call them good priests? Was it that they were intentional with all their parishioners, or that
I think in all of the priests that I've had, all of the priests that were present in the parish that I was in growing up, there was always a real love and for God and also for the parish, but also like the relationship that I had with each of them was really beautiful. That I always felt like they treated me with a lot of respect, probably more than I deserved. With a lot of, I guess, like they were always ready to ask me like different responsibilities in the parish, which was a big thing, I guess, for a kid who probably otherwise wouldn't have had as many responsibilities. And I felt like that was a really great sign of trust, and that really helped me respect them a lot. And then we would have them round for dinner whenever we could, and that was always great.
Okay, so when you say responsibilities, were you an altar server or those kind of responsibilities, or just like being involved in the parish and being asked to be involved in the parish?
So yeah, I was altar serving quite regularly, and then also different things, like if different things needed to be painted or worked on in the church, they would ask me to do different things like that. Yeah. So
how important do you think it would be for, especially like young men or young boys, how important is it for a priest to go out of their way to encourage them? And like, do you think that was part of the reason which led you to see your call into religious life? Or maybe someone else who wants to become a priest, or even like someone that wants to be a good father, having the call and showing, like being invited in, like how important do you think it was for you? And then how important do you think it is for just like young men in general to be asked that?
I think as a young person growing up, I always admired my priests a lot, and I think that the relationship that a priest can have with a young person is really unique, because it's similar to it should be a fatherhood, I guess, but in a different way, like somebody who really manifests, I guess, something of the goodness of God and the way that God sees a person, and I really think that was the experience that I had growing up, that the priests who I know were always so relatable, and so but always deeply in love with God and deeply in love with the church, and so given. And I think seeing that love that they had and the givenness, the gift of themselves to the parish and to the people that they had to care for and shepherd, I think being able to relate to them personally as well just gave me a whole new way of looking at the priesthood, a really unique way of looking at the priesthood, I guess, and I think that definitely had a big impact on my vocation. I think that the fact that I've had such beautiful priests growing up, and has really given me a deep love for the priesthood, I think.
What did your family look like when it came to this time period as well? Like, you had said that they had kind of protected you a little bit. So I guess first off, how many siblings do you have? I always like to ask that question. And then in what way do you think that your parents maybe facilitated those relationships, and in what way did they protect you, I guess?
So I have 2 sisters and 4 brothers. So I'm one of 7. I'm the second eldest. And I think that maybe a big way that I see now that my parents have protected me is really the access to I guess different environments, but especially like with media, and my parents were always they always wanted to be very careful with like the movies we watched and the different things, the amount of time I guess we would spend on the internet. And looking back, I can see how good that was for me. I guess I feel like in that way I was protected a lot.
I love, this is kind of a tangent, but I love that Father Dom always talks about in metaphysics that it has to be grounded in reality, right? So like the beginning of metaphysics, correct me because you are much better at this than I am, would be like the senses, right? To like feel and touch that there is a table, right? So I guess in that way, what you're saying kind of reminds me of like, oftentimes we talk about media as like something up in the clouds, right? It's not really like tangible. Whereas like in this way, your parents kind of rooted you in reality by allowing you to, or by limiting how much you can stay up in the unrelatable.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like the more that we are just present in front of what exists, and we're less inclined to be in our heads and especially in our imagination. And in our imagination, like we can, depending on what we feed our imagination with, it can be really damaging for us as a person. And it can also affect like the way that we live our life in the present, in the different relationships that we have, the being present to what my senses are telling me, and just living in the present moment really helps me to be present to the person that I'm in front of, and to really I guess foster really healthy relationships as well.
I'm thinking of so when I was a couple weeks ago I had someone texted me something, right? And I was having kind of an off day. Like I started the day kind of anxious, right? Just woke up that way. And I read the text like an hour after I woke up, and I started freaking out. And I was like, wait, are they saying this or are they saying that? And it wasn't until I actually ended up talking to my mom and talking to one of my friends and being like, hey, I'm going to read this to you. Does this sound like they're mad at me? And I know that's still kind of up in the clouds where we're not in reality, but at the same time, it was a good, like what I'm thinking of is it's a good thing to talk to somebody, like a real person, instead of being in my head, talking to a real person. They're like, no, just, it's very just plain. It's not like you're reading too much into it. Right. And it's kind of like that rooting in reality where it's almost better to like, instead of relying on the technology and having this thing that is literally up in the cloud, instead of the person that you can talk to and like bounce off, like, no, this is more grounding than that text message that you can't read into. You know what I mean?
It's definitely true. It's the further we are from the other person, I guess the harder it is to really like just face what is real and to know what the reality actually is. And it's beautiful because like being able to communicate over long distances is like a really good thing, and at the same time, like we know that like the presence of another person and the fact that like we actually need to be able to speak to them and really have that immediate contact is like it's essential as well. Like
I'm sure people are so tired. If anyone's like listening to every single podcast I have out, they're probably so tired of me saying this. But I think it is such a hard balance, and I think your soul can feel it when there's a part of you that needs to be on like a platform or needs to like so many people's jobs include media or having your phone on you for phone calls or text messages. Like you basically have to have a cell phone in this day and age. It's just like the expectations around you in the job. So like there's always that pull versus like the pull of being detached and having a little bit more space. And I actually saw this thing on in the internet the other day, but it was talking about, you know, going back to like how your parents protected you, right? They were saying wanting to give someone the freedom, like a child, the freedom that they need to express themselves and be able to connect with their friends. And then also protecting them from the world. And they said, get them a landline. And I was like, it's true. I mean, I would come home, like, cause I think you and I both grew up in a generation where we had, when we were younger, like no technology, like no phones, cell phones, right? Like not what we would think of a cell phone today, right? And then to now we've grown up with the growing of technology. So it's almost hard to separate for us, even more so maybe than like someone today that's born with technology. You can say like, I want to reject that, but it's like literally this technology and us grew at the same time. So sometimes I feel like it's hard to split the two, but we do have memories of what it was like to be a kid and have a landline, right? And I do think that is actually a good way to have some freedom, because I remember getting on the phone when I was in first grade. I would call up my friends and you'd have to remember their phone number and then like dial it on and then someone would be like, get off the phone, I need to make a phone call, you know, like that kind of stuff. There was like a tangible break or separation between that and your person. Whereas today it almost feels like, because of how advanced technology is, that it really comes like an extension of ourselves, right? In these tools. But again, it would be good to go back and protect your kids from that reality, right? Even if it is just going back to a landline, but also giving them the freedom to connect with their friends, right? Yeah. So that's interesting so you said that they, like your parents specifically, they would limit how much time you had on those things, but is that the only thing that they did, or what, you know, like, did they give you a cell phone, or was that something you had to get when you were older, or what did that look like? I guess just because we were on this topic, I like to collect some data here.
I think I got my first cell phone when I was 16. And it was because I went to World Youth Day, and I kind of needed a way to make sure that I didn't die. So that was the first time I got a cell phone.
Like, what did parents do when they couldn't send their kid with a cell phone?
Yeah, amazing.
I know, right? Like the amount of like let go or like release and trust in God you'd have to have. Yeah. So wait, so when you were 16, you went to World Youth Day? Where was it?
It was in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Amazing. First, tell me what it was like, but also, did that have an effect on your spiritual journey as well?
World Youth Day was an incredible experience for me, because in New Zealand, the church is the Catholic Church, I guess, is quite small in comparison to different places, and to have this exposure to so many other Catholics. I think they say that there were like 3.5 million people at the World Youth Day in Rio, and to see the faith so alive in so many young people was definitely a huge thing for me, and I think just really solidified the faith that I had. And just gave me a lot of joy in being Catholic. And then I guess it probably did make the transition into the school of life, the Catholic Discipleship College, much more natural for me.
Because what year, like, how old were you when you joined the discipleship college?
I was 18, so there was a year between World Youth Day and joining the Catholic Discipleship College.
That's amazing. It's kind of funny that you say that. I had like a similar experience on a much smaller scale. When I was in high school, I went to ICYC for the first time, and great. I did not want to go. My aunt forced me to go. But it was the same thing where it's like, oh my gosh, there's 1,000 other youth. Yeah, and I remember thinking like, wow, these other kids are also practicing their faith. And I think that was really influential for me as well. There might be something like I had on Evelyn Brush a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things she talked about in her episode was the development of the child, right? And so she was talking about like from 0 to 3, they're basically on you, like on your person. And then from like 3 to about 9, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, they need to be like next to you, probably around 7, 8. And then from like 7, 8 to like 16, they need to be active, and it's very much peer based, right? So this is the part where they're absorbing everything from everyone around them. So they need to be really active in the parish, like be altar servers, be greeters, like get them involved at a youth group or whatever, right? And then from like 16, 17 is kind of like the questioning period that she posed, which is like you have to have the questions that you have about your faith answered so that you can fully accept it, right? And so this is like how the human person, she was talking about the Waldorf education system, and she's like, it's very much how a child actually develops, but it mirrors extremely well with how the Catholic Church like developed or how the Catholic Church has talked about activity, or how a child or person develops in the faith as well. But it's really important, I think, in that point where I think I might have been a little younger than you were when I went to ICYC than when you went to World Youth Day, but it was still in that period of like seeing your peers, right? Seeing like the people and how influential like a group of peers doing the same thing or enjoying the same thing when it comes to our faith, how important that is. Yeah, I definitely think there's a line there, you know, we should like pin that somewhere. Yeah. That's important. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely had a huge impact on me, and I've remained friends, I think, with a lot of the people who I went to World Youth Day with, and I think that was a big thing, coming home and knowing that I could stay in contact with people who had lived this like crazy experience that I'd lived. Yeah.
Were they in New Zealand with you, or are they over like all over the world?
So most of them were from New Zealand, and I went in a group that was made up of people from all over the country. But I've kept in touch with a lot of them, and especially in the years after World Youth Day, just catching up with them was a great way of reminding me of that experience. Yeah.
Okay, so after World Youth Day, you have like a year, right?
That's
and this
right,
is really was it your last year of high school, basically?
That's right, yeah.
Basically, you know, homeschooling. So at this point, what were you thinking when it came to your vocation? Had you even considered vocations at this point? Were you thinking, because you had really good relationships with priests in your diocese, had you ever thought about maybe becoming a priest instead of religious life, or what does this all look like in your head?
So I have a confession. It's a little bit hard to remember that year. But I definitely never, I don't think, ever considered diocesan priesthood. Yeah. And I remember telling the vocations director that at one time in New Zealand, and he, I don't think he quite understood how that was possible. But it was true that I never really ever thought about being a parish priest. Yeah. And then, which is beautiful, because then I met Father Dominique, and I really felt like what he lived was something that I really wanted to live. So I think maybe there was a grace happening somewhere there.
That's so interesting, because one of the brothers had said that they also felt like they weren't called to diocesan. And it's interesting. I had a sister, her name was Sister Marina, and she came on the podcast a couple months ago, and one of the things she talks about is her call, right, to the religious life was very soft-spoken like that as well, where it wasn't like she ever considered really anything else.
Yeah.
But she did have in her story is a little different, because she did have a period of time where she went away from the church, but it wasn't like she was ever planning to get married and have kids. It was very much like this like small consistent call on her heart, right, that like maybe she didn't recognize at the time, but she like followed eventually, you know. And I think that's interesting to hear that you and another brother both were like, yeah, just diocesan wasn't you know, for me. I also find it interesting because we have the most exposure to a diocesan So if you're thinking, I don't want to be a diocesan, did you consider religious life? Were you considering visiting other monasteries, or like what kind of other priests were you thinking, or were you thinking about maybe I'm called to like become like a father and get married and have kids? Like, what did that look like?
I think that until I was 17, I really hadn't put much thought into it. I don't think. I was really in love with playing soccer, and I was happy just to think about my next soccer game. Until then. And in New Zealand, there aren't that many religious communities, especially male religious communities. And so I actually hadn't really considered religious life either. But I don't think I was really discerning very strongly at that point. I think it was once I met Father Dominique that the question really started to appear, and it
Well, yeah, I get that too, because I wasn't really discerning either until I went to Belmont Abbey College in North Carolina. Right? Once you have like a very focused religious either education or experience, it could be, like an ICYC or a World Youth Day. But I think for me, even with ICYC, we just didn't have a lot of religious people around. Like there wasn't something tangible. It was like they were flying from out of state, and so it wasn't like you could go and visit them. I guess there was the monastery up in Jerome, but again, it wasn't until I went to the college that I was like, oh, there are other options than just getting married and having kids, which I've always wanted to do. So that was my call. But yeah, I'm always curious about like what other people's default is. I don't know. Again, it's a default, meaning it's not something that you've put like thoughts in. It's just like, oh yeah, one day I'll do this. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're like, I didn't have a default.
I'm not sure how much I thought at all in general before leaving for Catholic Discipleship College.
I have to say, with how much you say you like soccer, I'm like, maybe the brothers should start a soccer team. Like, no, for real though, there's enough Catholic homeschoolers that you guys could coach like a team all the way through like to like middle school or high school when they start teaching. That would be sick. You'd have to have some really cool religious name though.
I think I would probably get too competitive, and then I'd have to go to confession a lot more often. So I'm not sure that'll.
Well, the confession part might not be the greatest, but competitiveness in the United States is not a bad thing. But yeah, we definitely want to keep you out of confession for sure if we can. But that would be cool. I'm gonna still float this because that'd be really cool. Can you imagine? Well, you guys are also out in the community. It would be a great way to show other people that brothers are fun, and you could be a religious.
It would be pretty cool.
It would be pretty cool.
I would be down. I would just need somebody else to be. my superior would need the.
You could be the assistant coach. Your superior can be, like, does Brother Johannes or Father Johannes, does he play?
No, not
does
so
Father
much.
Dom?
No, not at all.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Man. Maybe not. I'm just imagining it. That would be pretty cool. Speaking of imaginations. Sorry. Very long tangent here. Anyways, okay. So then you go to the discipleship college and you meet Father John, and then you go to Mexico. How did that, did you, I guess at this point I'm talking about like your family, were you pretty set, like, I'm going to Mexico as a novice and like I'm going to stay there, or was it like I'm just going to test this out and I'll come back maybe?
I initially went just to test it out for a couple of weeks, and then I liked, I felt like there were some incredibly holy brothers that I found were just incredible, and so I wanted to stay longer, and I stayed another couple of months before going back, but in those months I'd kind of decided that was where I was called, where I felt called, and I went home mostly just to say goodbye. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's because that's what I was kind of wondering is like, had you said goodbye to your parents at this point, like had really made your decision or,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And it's so funny you say about like meeting some holy brothers
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things I always think is a telltale sign of holiness is joy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I feel like when I go to Verbum Spei, regardless of what you guys feel, because every time I've said this, brothers were like, well, no, but I feel like when I've talked to other lady that have met you guys, they all talk about how joyful you are. Especially, I mean, this is so tangible in Father Dom. Like you meet
It's
him
true,
and
yeah.
it's like radiates like,
Mm-hmm.
which not to be confused with like happiness, but like true, like peace and joy. Yeah. That's what I get when I go to the monastery. Does it feel that way for you?
It's definitely impressed me. So Father Dominique and then certain brothers in Mexico, like what impressed me so much was just how much they were in love with their vocation and with Jesus. And I think that's like the joy is like part of that, is that they're just so in love and so so given, and like their life is like their whole vocation is just like their life, like that they're and it is a joy for them, like they're just really in love with what they are, which is beautiful. Yeah.
Another thing is, I think the reason that religious life is so beautiful again is it is a family, right? You are a family. And so it's funny you said I have two sisters and a brother. Is that
2 sisters and 4 brothers?
Oh, 4 brothers.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I thought you said 1 brother. 4 brothers. That's amazing. What a cool family. But yeah, so like again, in a way, when you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of speaking for you in this. But when you become a brother, you really grow into that family and that wholeness of what the religious community is. And I could see, like, because you had such a large family, you grew up in such a large family, that I could see how that would feel like home in a way, because you are gaining all of these new siblings,
Yeah, I definitely really love having the brothers, and I think I wouldn't survive without them, which is maybe a good sign.
Yeah.
But the fact that we need each other, but we also it's such a joy to live with brothers and just to really share our life and all the joys and all that we do in our life. To be able to share it makes it an incredible experience. Yeah. I really can't imagine not having that, so I think it's probably a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm wondering if it's similar to like the relationship Aaron and I have in a way. One of the things I always tell people is that he makes me a better person.
Yeah.
Right? And I think in many ways we're very different. But I think those differences are probably the most beautiful part of our relationship, because it's like maybe like a rock in a river, right? And the more friction you have against the other rock, right? It turns it into like this very beautiful, smooth, like beautiful rock. My son would like that analogy. But I think that in a way, I really find it so valuable in my spiritual journey to have someone different, because I'm learning we're learning to love each other and to help each other grow. In a way, is it similar in that with the brothers? Because it's like that, but with however many brothers you have, right? So you have all of these different brothers, because it's not just, you've had experiences in Mexico, you've been in Luxembourg, right? So you're meeting all these different people and they all have different virtues, like natural virtues, right? And it's probably similar in that the more you're in the river, right? You're the smoother you're going to, and more rounded you're going to be, and more centered you're going to be, I guess.
I definitely think that, because in religious life, something that's quite particular is that we enter a community, and over time, but also like the community that already existed is made up of people that we're not exactly choosing for their qualities and for the way that they are. Yeah. And so in a way, everybody like in the monastery is kind of in the same boat, where we're taken by surprise every so often by something that we don't like, or something that like we find a little bit more difficult in a certain brother, or knowing that like that's part of religious life, is that we've entered, and not because like the community is a perfect environment like already, but because we want to love Jesus together, and that like those frictions are an opportunity to love Christ, and to go further in that love that we have for each other as well. So yeah, that it's part of the life, but it's also a beautiful part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great separation of like maybe the two vocations, right? Like a different viewpoint to look at it. But at the same time, what I would say is any person that marries their spouse is lying to them if they think they've chosen for the right qualities, because I don't think anyone really knows.
And it's true,
because I mean, I don't even know, like I've had to grow so much, like even just having children, right? I've changed so much because I didn't even know myself.
That's
right?
true, yeah,
because there's this new opportunity and new thing. So in a way it's kind of like a lie if you're like, I'm choosing you for certain qualities. I was trying to make a joke basically that we don't really know who we're marrying until we've been married to them. But at the same time, I see the difference in that, like, you guys are kind of just like, well, here we are, you know.
Yeah.
But another thing I'll say is the brothers, especially in Boise, I feel like you guys are extremely close.
I think it's true. We are, well, we all consider ourselves very blessed. I hope my brothers consider that they're very blessed to be my brother. But I think, yeah, no, it is beautiful to live in a community where you know that everybody has that same desire, and everybody has weaknesses, but like regardless, the intention that we have is all the same, and that we want to carry each other and be carried by each other, I guess. But to really, everybody is so given. The brothers are so given, and that just makes it so much more joyful and so much lighter, I guess. Yeah.
And I think that's probably what I'm trying to say in that very difficult, awkward last sentence, is that it is true that everyone is so open and given, like you're saying. Like, it isn't like anything is, I keep saying like flow, but it's really like that nothing's rigid. It's not like there's any edges that need softened, like that someone hasn't been vulnerable or hasn't been open, or I like what you said, given, right? And I think you can feel that when you enter in. You know what I mean? Because I mean, I think everyone's probably experienced this when you go into a room and something just happened and you're like, there's a weird feeling walking into this room without knowing it. And I mean, granted, I'm not there all the time, but every time I've been there, there's this like profound peace, right, going in. So I can see that you guys are the place. Like, the brothers are Verbum Spei's monastery, right? So it is like how you guys are is what you're going to experience in a way. Hey, really quick, I just wanted to say that 71% of you that listen to our content regularly have yet to subscribe to our channel. If you're enjoying this piece of content, go ahead and click right now. It's a free and easy way for us to continue to bring the guests you want to hear and the conversations that you want to have. That being said, it's also a good way to help engage with us and have feedback so we know what type of content you want to hear and making sure that every episode is worth your time. Thank you so much if you have already subscribed, and if you haven't, go ahead and click the button down below. So you said that you left, you went back to like say goodbye, and then you went to Mexico, and did you stay in, so how long were you in Mexico before they opened up here in Boise? Or did you go to Luxembourg before? Sorry, just go ahead and unscramble all of that.
So I arrived in Mexico in 2016, and I was mostly in Mexico between 2016 and 2019 when we started the house in Boise. But I did spend maybe a total of 9 months in Luxembourg. in the house that we had there.
Okay.
So after arriving in Mexico, I spent maybe about 9 months total in Luxembourg, at different periods between 2016 and 2019. Yeah.
Okay. And then you arrived in Boise in 2020?
In 2019, in April, just after, just before Easter, I think. Yeah.
What has been your experience since you've come to Boise? How have you liked living in Idaho? And then Boise was relatively new, so you came here when it was starting. Mm-hmm. So could you talk about like kind of the development of the brother and your fraternity here? Mm-hmm. Could you go into that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. So I arrived in 2019 with Father Johannes and Father Dominique and a couple of other brothers. And I arrived from Mexico. I think just speaking English and then was really freeing. And then getting to know people over time was really a real blessing. I've made so many good friends in Boise, and I really love just the atmosphere of Boise, I guess. The people are amazing. People have been so generous to us here, and we've been incredibly blessed to be here as a community in general. And we initially set up our monastery at the rectory beside the cathedral, and we got to know a lot of people at the cathedral parish and a lot of the young adults at BSU, which was just down the road. And then since then, I think in 2021, we moved to what was the Nazareth Retreat Center, which is it's an incredible gift to be there. We're really grateful actually to Bishop Peter for having provided that for us, and it's so good for our life to be able to receive people and to have a place where we can really spend our whole day and just in prayer and working, and really a place where we can receive people who can come on retreat and just spend time with us, entering into our life. And it's been a real blessing to be here.
What I'll say about the retreat center, and we'll go back to the rectory. Mm-hmm. We'll go back there in a second. But the thing that's beautiful about you guys being at the monastery or at the Nazareth Center is that you have a place that you can actually do work, and that it's kind of like your own. It's almost like having your own home, mm-hmm. like from renting to buying, which mm-hmm. I know is very secular kind of example, but it's so true that once you find your home, right, then you can put work into it, right? Mm-hmm. You can remodel it or mm-hmm. have a garden mm-hmm. or whatever. And I think from what I understand and what I've learned from Father Dom and you guys, that's so important to like the human person is mm-hmm. the work that we put in the suffering, right? Mm-hmm. And we can only love something like through our suffering and through the effort, I mm-hmm. guess, that we put forth, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important that you guys mm-hmm. were given that as well. Yeah. And I think you can bless people with that mm-hmm. at the center now mm-hmm. because of it. Yeah,
I really think that like work is something that's so important to human life, because like we really because we're in bodies, like we need to make the environment that we're in our own in a way, and like we need to adapt. We work to adapt the place we're in to suit our life better. And if our life is like a religious life that's really oriented towards God, and the fact that we have a monastery where we can really adapt it to our life, and our life of silence and prayer, and then also our life of just being able to receive people and having a place of formation, adapting the environment so that it suits our life, and really it's really at the service of what we desire to live. It's a really beautiful gift.
Yeah, you went from such a small space that was close knit to this mm-hmm. other to this new space, but the thing about the new space, you have broader ability to really serve and mm-hmm. to grow, mm-hmm. right? Whereas the other place you guys couldn't grow anymore. Mm-hmm. It was very much mm-hmm. like mm-hmm. packed.
Yeah. And it was definitely harder to receive people who wanted to spend time with us at the rectory, So the fact that we do have a lot of space where we are now at the monastery is a really beautiful thing. It really allows people to just come and spend time and have a time of retreat, or a time of prayer, and it's a beautiful. I guess it is a different dynamic to the way things were at the rectory, because in the rectory people would be able to come, and we would always, just because of the space, have to be really close to them, and the more people that came, the closer we got to, and having different events, and there would be a couple of classes each week in the evenings that people could come to, and we got to know a lot of good people, and we really enjoyed the time that we spent with them, and we were able to be very close to them. Just the chapel was on the 3rd floor, and so they would walk through our whole house to get to the chapel, but it was beautiful, and we really do. I still consider it a really beautiful time that we had. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the 3rd floor on the chapel, I have to say it was such a small chapel too that it was like so cramped up there. But I have to say there were so many nights when I was driving home that I would still be singing a night prayer, and that it was just like so magical still.
Yeah, it was really beautiful to be so many of us in such a tight space, but really, praying together and living this beautiful time of like prayer at the end of a night of study with Father Dominique, or after having a dinner, and to be able to spend some time in prayer together. It was really beautiful.
So I want to ask you, the next thing I would have to ask you is how in your vocation were you feeling called to the priesthood?
I think that after having met Father Dominique, my desire for religious life and the desire for priesthood were kind of one and the same, because I think he just inspired me so much with all that he did, and being a priest was so much a part of that I never saw them as two separate things. I always desired to be a religious priest, I guess.
So did you think that it was going to take you... So let's go through your vocations. So you have to take so many vows. Is it 3? 4?
So 3 vows. Yeah. So poverty, chastity, and obedience. And we take, after about 2.5 years, we take what we call first vows, depending on the brother. I guess the rhythm is different for each brother. And then 3 years after that, we take final vows. And where we commit to poverty, chastity, and obedience until death, until we die.
So then how long after your final vows did you end up going to Luxembourg to study for the priesthood?
I think it must have been in September of 2021 that I went to Luxembourg to finish my studies, and I took my final vows in May of 2021, so it would have just been a couple of months.
But you still had to go and study for the priesthood, or
that's right.
Okay, so where did you study for the priesthood then?
So I did some of my studies through the seminary in Mexico already, and I think the whole time I was preparing for my final vows, I was also preparing for priesthood at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after taking final vows, there was still about 2 more years before of schooling that I needed, which I needed to go to Luxembourg to complete. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about this. Just to give us a picture of Verbum Spei. And down in Mexico, is the seminary connected to the brothers, or is it separate but close?
It's separate but close, yeah.
Okay. And so do most of the brothers for your order, do they go to that school regardless if they're in Luxembourg or Boise, or I think, aren't you guys developing in the Philippines as well?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do all of them go to the same monastery down in Mexico, or how does that work?
No, so I was an exception, I guess, because of I entered before there was a house in Boise, and so I just all of the Mexican brothers go through the seminary if they're pursuing priesthood, and so I was part of that group that pursued priesthood through the seminary of Saltillo, and then after coming to Boise, because there's no seminary in Boise, I had to go to Luxembourg to finish. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, okay, so this is another good question is, and tell me if you can't answer this, but do you feel like there is a different call for someone that's called to the priesthood in religious life, or do you feel like most of the brothers are called to the priesthood in religious life? What does that dynamic look like?
I think that most brothers who enter Verbum Spei would be called to both priesthood and religious life, because our vocation is so close. I think most of the brothers do become priests, and like part of our vocation is really to have that apostolic life where we bring Jesus to people, and being a priest is so helpful in that life, in that aspect of life. But I think there are certain brothers actually who are called to a purely religious life, but I think it is a special calling. I didn't have that calling, so I'm not sure, but I guess so. Yeah.
Do you think that I think that's another interesting part is you guys are so active in the community here, and you guys are outward. I mean, many times I wasn't planning on it, but we've seen you on hikes, or we've seen you at concerts, like the Baroque concerts, or just things like that. You guys are so involved. But also, I know that many states, not just in Idaho, but many states are really lacking enough priests. Has the diocese also kind of encouraged you guys in a way to help out with parishes around your monastery because of the shortage of priests?
In the Diocese of Boise, we have been asked to help out at different places, but I think at the same time the Diocese of Boise has been so respectful of the way that our life is really centered around our prayer life together as a community, and that's something which is so important for us in the way that we live our priesthood. And it's beautiful that the diocese has been so respectful of that, and so it's never been demanded of us, but we've been really happy, I guess, to be involved in the different parishes where we've been invited, and it's always a blessing to be able to share a little bit of our life in the different parishes that we've been asked to serve in.
I know that some of the brothers have been involved in different parishes, like youth programs and stuff, so that's right. I'm sure that's a blessing. I think one of the biggest blessings that I've noticed from you guys coming to Boise, and granted this wouldn't have helped me in my adolescence because I lived in Payette, but I'm thinking what a blessing it is that the youth is getting to see you guys, because it doesn't seem like religious life is really even an option for many youth because it's just not seen. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes that's because it's a cloistered convent, you know, or something like that, which isn't the case in Idaho, but I think part of that call, it can be harder to discern maybe in the States because it's just not as common, right?
I think that's definitely been my experience. In New Zealand, we really had very few religious communities, and I never saw a group of brothers before going to Mexico. And so if I hadn't had Father Dominique's witness, I'm not sure I would have ever even considered religious life. So it's definitely true that the fact that there is an exposure to religious life in the Diocese of Boise is a really beautiful thing for the young people who maybe God is calling to a religious vocation. Yeah.
Do you guys go to ICYC?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, well, I think the last question I have for you, and I've asked the other brothers this, and I think it's a good question, is what would be your advice to anyone who is interested or feels like they might have a call to religious life? What would your advice be in terms of, deepening that discernment?
Mm-hmm. I definitely feel that any time we give to Jesus in discernment is a huge grace and a huge it's something that pleases Jesus a lot, in the sense that like we're taking seriously this desire to really offer him something, and so there's never any time wasted. I think that would be the first thing that I would say, is that when we really take discernment seriously, it's something that pleases Jesus so much, because he sees that we're ready to offer him something, and maybe he will take us up on that desire that we have to pursue discernment, and maybe he'll lead us somewhere where we didn't expect. But I think just in general, like that boldness to pursue a religious vocation or the vocation to the priesthood is something that really is beautiful and that pleases the heart of Jesus so much. And I would just encourage anybody who might have a desire or a question on their heart to really spend some time with the religious community, or go spend some time in seminary, and know that any time that you spend, God gives back 100-fold. So don't be afraid. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. I think that what you said is perfect.
Thank you.
So thank you, Father, so much for being on my show.
Thank you for having me. It was, very brave of you.
Well, I also feel bad because I'm like, I've known you as Brother Johnathan for so long that I'm like, Brother, Father Johnathan.
I call myself Brother Johnathan. When I speak to myself, I call myself Brother Johnathan.
Okay. So it is not just, okay. Well, anyways, I am just so thankful. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.